Kill them all, God will know his own. The day 20,000 Cathars died to keep a secret. Picture a flame that refused to die. Centuries ago, mystics in the mountains of southern France held a secret so transformative that empires waged war to silence it forever. They were branded heretics, hunted and burned alive, yet their wisdom survived. What if everything you've been taught about spirituality, power, and truth was designed to keep you imprisoned? Today, we're uncovering the forbidden legacy of the Cathars, and why their ancient message is more urgent now than ever before. Stay with me, this journey will change how you see the world. The Keepers of Forgotten Light. There are stories history tries to bury. Not because they're false, but because they're too potent to control. The tale of the Cathars is one such story, a narrative of spiritual rebels who dared to challenge the greatest authority of their time, not with swords, but with an idea that shook the foundations of religious power. In the misty peaks of southern France, throughout the 11th and 12th centuries, a mystical movement took root. These seekers called themselves the Good People, and their vision of reality was radically different from anything the medieval world had seen. While the Roman Church built cathedrals of gold and crowned kings with divine authority, the Cathars whispered a dangerous truth. The material world itself was a carefully constructed illusion, a cosmic prison designed to trap divine souls in endless cycles of suffering. Imagine standing at the crossroads between two completely different understandings of existence. On one path, the Church of Rome proclaimed that salvation required submission to priests, rituals, and institutional hierarchy. On the other hand, the Cathars taught something revolutionary, that divinity already lived within you, waiting to be remembered, not bestowed by any external power. Their teachings didn't emerge from nowhere. Like underground rivers flowing through time, Cathar wisdom connected to earlier mystical traditions. The Gnostic Christians of the first centuries spoke of a false creator, a Demiurge who fashioned this flawed world while the true God dwelled in realms of pure spirit. Persian Zoroastrianism described an eternal battle between light and darkness. Eastern philosophies spoke of Maya, the veil of illusion that blinds humanity to deeper realities. The Cathars wove these threads together into a tapestry that made perfect, terrifying sense to those who listened. Here's what made them so threatening. They rejected everything that gave the medieval church its power. They denied that water baptism could cleanse the soul. They refused to worship the crucifix, seeing it not as a symbol of redemption but as an instrument of worldly suffering. They taught that Christ never truly inhabited flesh. How could the infinite divine confine itself to corrupted matter? Instead, they saw Jesus as a messenger of light, appearing in human form only to guide imprisoned souls back to their celestial home. Think about what this meant in practical terms. If you didn't need a priest to reach God, why pay tithes? If sacraments were meaningless, why bow to bishops? If the Bible's Old Testament described not a loving creator but a tyrannical impostor, why accept any of the church's authority? The entire pyramid of medieval power suddenly had no foundation. The Cathars didn't just preach these ideas, they embodied them. Their spiritual elite, the perfecti, lived with breathtaking integrity. They renounced violence completely, embraced vegetarianism, practiced celibacy, and wandered between villages offering healing, teaching, and a sacred initiation called the consolamentum. This wasn't a symbolic ritual performed by corrupt clergy in golden robes. This was direct spiritual transmission, the awakening of inner knowledge that transformed ordinary believers into enlightened guides. Entire towns and noble families converted. In the Languedoc region, Catharism wasn't a fringe belief, it was a flourishing spiritual civilization that offered an alternative to everything Rome represented. Stone fortresses became centers of mystical learning. Troubadours sang not just of courtly love but of souls trapped in matter, yearning for liberation. A decentralized network of awakened communities demonstrated that another way of living was possible, and that's precisely when the hammer fell. In 1208, after the death of a papal envoy, an act the Cathars themselves never endorsed, Pope Innocent III unleashed something unprecedented, a crusade against fellow Christians. The Albigensian Crusade wasn't about reclaiming holy lands from distant infidels. It was about annihilating a spiritual vision that threatened to dismantle the entire machinery of ecclesiastical control. What followed was systematic genocide. The siege of Béziers in 1209 produced one of history's most chilling phrases. When crusaders asked how to distinguish Catholic townspeople from Cathar heretics, the papal legate reportedly declared, "Kill them all, God will recognize those who belong to him. 20,000 people died in a single day. The town burned for weeks. For 4 decades, southern France became a killing ground. Castles fell, villages burned. Thousands were captured and given a choice: renounce your faith or face the flames. The church chose fire deliberately. If the Cathars believed matter was corrupt, Rome would reduce their bodies to ash, proving that the material could be utterly destroyed. The final act played out at Montségur in 1244. This mountain fortress, perched like an eagle's nest in the Pyrenees, became the last refuge of the perfecti. After months of siege, more than 200 Cathars faced the ultimate test: renounce or burn. Not one recanted. They descended from their fortress singing, walked into a massive pyre, and chose death over betraying what they knew to be true. Why such unwavering conviction? Because to a Gnostic, this life was temporary, but the soul was eternal. To deny their inner knowing would mean returning to the prison of ignorance, a fate they considered worse than any physical death. They believed their souls would transcend the reach of the archons and return to the pleroma, the realm of authentic light. By 1255, organized Catharism had been obliterated. The Inquisition, established specifically to hunt remaining heretics, worked with merciless efficiency. Family lines were extinguished, books were reduced to ashes, names were erased from records. For centuries, the Cathars existed only as footnotes, vague warnings about the fate of those who challenged Rome's authority. But here's the mystery that haunts us across time. The light they carried never completely died. Fragments survived in folk memory, in symbols carved secretly into stone, in whispers passed between generations of seekers. And today, that ancient flame flickers again, not in medieval France, but in hearts awakening to truths that institutions still fear. The question isn't whether the Cathars were destroyed. The question is, what were they protecting that was worth dying for? And why does their message feel so urgently relevant to our contemporary moment? The architecture of awakening. To truly understand the Cathars, we must venture beyond historical facts and enter the realm of metaphysical vision. Their worldview wasn't merely a theological disagreement, it was a complete reimagining of reality itself, a map of existence that turned conventional spirituality inside out. At the heart of Cathar teaching stood a profound dualism, but not the simplistic good versus evil narrative we often encounter. This was cosmic architecture, a description of 2 opposing forces that governed all of existence. On one side, the God of light, the true source of all spirit, infinite and formless. On the other, the prince of this world, a counterfeit creator who fashioned the material realm as an elaborate trap. Picture your consciousness as a candle flame enclosed in thick glass. The glass represents your body, your conditioned thoughts, your attachments to temporary things, everything that weighs down your awareness. But the flame itself? That's your authentic nature, radiant, timeless, unbounded. The Cathars taught that every human being carries this divine spark, a fragment of the true light, imprisoned within physical form through a deception of cosmic proportions. This prison wasn't created by the loving God that Christ spoke of. According to Cathar cosmology, a blind architect, what Gnostics called the Demiurge, fashioned the material universe. This entity mistook itself for the supreme creator, crafting a realm of suffering, decay, and impermanence. Everything you see, touch, and experience in the physical world bears the fingerprint of this false god's limited understanding. This is why the Cathars couldn't accept the incarnation as mainstream Christianity taught it. How could the perfect, formless God of infinite light descend into corrupted matter? To them, Christ was a messenger who appeared in human form only to awaken souls from their slumber, not to participate in the world's suffering. His crucifixion wasn't a redemptive sacrifice demanded by divine justice, it was a tragedy orchestrated by the powers governing this fallen realm. Here's the revolutionary shift in perspective. The Cathars didn't believe humans were born in sin. They believed we were born into forgetting. Their gospel wasn't about guilt requiring punishment. It was about remembrance piercing through the seductions of power, wealth, sensory pleasure, and fear to recall your true identity as a being of light, temporarily fallen like a star from celestial heights, now seeking the path home. But the journey back wasn't simple or easy. The world, as the Cathars perceived it, functioned as an intricate labyrinth. Every attachment, every indulgence in material desire, every surrender to false authority became another thread binding the soul to what they called the wheel of reincarnation. Unlike Orthodox Christianity with its single lifetime followed by eternal judgment, the Cathars embraced the concept of transmigration souls returning again and again, caught in matter's snares until they achieved purification. Liberation demanded radical inner discipline combined with direct knowing, what they called Gnosis. Not intellectual belief or blind faith, but lived awakening. The perfecti, those who had pierced the illusion, underwent the consolamentum, a sacred rite that merged baptism, ordination, and spiritual illumination into a single transformative experience. This wasn't theater or symbolism. According to Cathar teaching, the consolamentum was energetic transmission, a passing of flame from one awakened soul to another. Initiates would fast and pray for days, preparing their consciousness. Then, in absolute stillness, the laying on of hands by a perfect would serve as a key, unlocking memories encoded in the soul's deepest layers. They believed this ritual aligned the initiate with higher realms' vibrations, potentially breaking the chain of reincarnation and preparing the soul for its final return to the light. Once someone received the consolamentum, they were expected to live as a perfect, embracing radical integrity, complete non-violence, and detachment from worldly ambition. This might seem extreme by contemporary standards, but practical wisdom underlay it. The Cathars witnessed how power structures corrupted. They saw war, greed, and blind obedience generating endless suffering. They offered an alternative, not a perfect society, but a sacred countercurrent, a way of living that refused to feed the world's madness. Even their understanding of spiritual forces was sophisticated and nuanced. The Cathars taught that angels and archons, entities operating behind the visible veil, came in two varieties. Some served as guides toward liberation. Others functioned as jailers, sometimes appearing cloaked in light while actually serving the Demiurge. Discernment became essential, even when dealing with the unseen. This concept of deceptive light echoes through multiple mystical traditions. Sufi teachers warned of the nafs al-amara, the commanding self that masquerades as divine guidance. Buddhist teachings spoke of Mara, the deceiver who uses illusion to keep consciousness trapped in form. Gnostic texts described archonic forces that manipulate human perception. All pointed to a single truth: not everything that appears luminous is genuinely divine. Walking the Cathar path meant confronting these illusions, both external and internal. Ego, pride, attachment to pleasure, even clinging to suffering itself. These were understood as chains forged not by destiny but by forgetting. Breaking them required not aggression but vigilant awareness. Yet the Cathars were far from nihilistic. Their teachings overflowed with quiet compassion. They believed in healing, in inner peace, in the radiant beauty of a soul aligned with its source. Their ethics grew not from imposed rules but from love, a love transcending form, always pointing toward the eternal. Their cosmology even included a vision of ultimate resolution. The Cathars taught that eventually, when all souls finally awakened and liberated themselves, the material world would dissolve like a nightmare vanishing at dawn. The light would gather its scattered fragments and return to the source, while the false creation would evaporate like morning mist before the sun. This was their apocalypse, not fiery judgment, but radiant reunion. The question becomes, how does one begin such a journey? What practical steps lead toward awakening this inner knowing? And how can an ancient path speak to our modern hunger for authentic truth? The Cathars understood that truth isn't given, it's remembered. And remembrance requires shattering illusions so deeply woven into daily existence that they've become indistinguishable from reality itself. Their path wasn't about condemning physical existence out of hatred for the body. They saw matter as an enchanted mirror, beautiful, yes, but capable of seducing the soul into forgetting its radiance. Awakening meant learning to discern what belonged to the light and what belonged to the world's illusion. This discernment was central to Catharism. It wasn't abstract philosophy. It was inner knowing, born from silence, discipline, and lived experience. Think of it as tuning an instrument. The soul, once clouded by noise, becomes capable of vibrating with divine harmony again. The perfecti embodied this harmony. They were unconsidered superior to others, humility marked their presence, but they had made the inward turn and followed it to its end. Their lives became clear vessels of light, and their very presence reportedly awakened remembrance in those around them. Echoes across time, the fires of Montsagur consumed bodies but not ideas. Even as the last perfecti walked into the flames in 1244, singing hymns as smoke rose toward the Pyrenees peaks, something essential survived. seeds scattered on the wind. Whispers encoded in stone, a memory that refused to die. For centuries, official history tried to erase the Cathars completely. The Inquisition worked with terrifying efficiency, burning not just people but every manuscript, every record, every trace of their teachings. Yet fragments persisted in the strangest places, in folk songs sung by peasants who didn't understand the word's true meaning, in symbols carved secretly into church walls, in the haunted landscapes of Languedoc where locals still spoke of the good people who once walked among them. And something remarkable happened. In the 19th and 20th centuries, as industrialization hollowed out traditional spirituality and materialism tightened its grip on Western consciousness, seekers began rediscovering Cathar wisdom. It started with scholars piecing together Inquisition records, trying to understand what these medieval heretics actually believed. But it became something more, a recognition that the questions the Cathars asked remained urgently relevant. Enter Yves Maris, a figure who would dedicate his life to breathing new vitality into Cathar teachings. Maris wasn't a historian content to study the past as dead artifact. He was a mystic rebel against spiritual amnesia, convinced that Cathar vision spoke directly to our contemporary crisis. He didn't simply analyze their doctrines, he sought to embody their spirit, to translate ancient wisdom into language that could guide souls navigating a world of distraction, disconnection, and relentless materialism. Maris looked at modern civilization and saw the same sickness the Cathars once opposed. The Rex Mundi, the false king, the prince of this world, had merely changed costumes. Where medieval society worshipped feudal lords and corrupt clergy, contemporary culture bows before technology, consumerism, and algorithmic manipulation. The prison looks different, but the chains function identically, keeping humanity distracted from its divine nature, trapped in cycles of desire and dissatisfaction. What made Maris's work significant wasn't nostalgic recreation of medieval practices. It was his insistence that Cathar teachings weren't historical curiosities, but living truths for anyone ready to see beyond society illusions. He asked penetrating questions. What if the Cathars were correct? What if the material world genuinely functions as a trap, and only awakening to the light within offers authentic freedom? What if their forbidden wisdom was never meant solely for the 13th century, but for us, right here, right now? This perspective transforms how we understand the Cathar legacy. They become not tragic victims of religious persecution, but prophets whose time has circled back around. Their radical ethics, refusing violence, living simply, seeing through power's seductions, practicing compassion without compromise, these weren't medieval peculiarities. They're precisely what our wounded world desperately needs. Consider the Cathar teaching about the consolamentum. Maris emphasized this wasn't just an ancient ceremony to be recreated with period-accurate robes and Latin phrases. It represented something deeper, a metaphor for the radical reorientation every soul requires. To receive the consolamentum meant stepping out of illusion into truth, not by joining an institution but by becoming a vessel of light in a world of shadows. Imagine a lamp buried under layers of accumulated dust. The Cathar path wasn't about adding decorations or complexity. It was about wiping away everything obscuring the lamp's inherent radiance. Maris believed that in our age of overstimulation and fragmented attention, the Cathar call towards simplicity, clarity, and inner purity resonates more powerfully than ever. He was particularly drawn to their lived authenticity. The Cathars didn't merely believe in purity, simplicity, and compassion, they embodied these qualities daily. Picture communities where leaders possessed nothing, where service was the highest calling, where nobody was manipulated by fear of hell or bribed with promises of heaven. This wasn't utopian fantasy, it was a documented reality for the perfecti. Such lived authenticity made them threatening to medieval power structures, and Maris argued the same dynamic operates today. In an era where spirituality gets commodified, packaged, and diluted into Instagram platitudes, the Cathar flame cuts through superficiality with uncompromising simplicity. Live by truth, embody light, cause no harm, seek liberation from illusion. But here's the paradox Maris fully acknowledged. Catharism cannot simply be reconstructed. The Cathars were annihilated, their texts destroyed, their communities scattered to ash. What remains is fragmentary whispers preserved in hostile Inquisition records, scattered testimonies, echoes in poetry and folk memory. Reviving Catharism, therefore, isn't about archaeological restoration. It's about listening to the silence between fragments, allowing essence to speak again. Maris embraced this challenge. He didn't claim singular possession of Cathar truth. Instead, he became a steward of their spirit, inviting others to join the quest. He understood Catharism not as fossilized past, but as living current like an underground river that resurfaces when historical soil shifts. And perhaps our moment, with its collapse of old certainties and hunger for authentic meaning, is precisely when such currents must emerge. The same materialism the Cathars opposed has only intensified. The same disconnection from the sacred has only deepened. The same power structures that burned them alive have evolved into more sophisticated forms of control, no longer requiring physical pyres when psychological manipulation suffices. At its heart, the Cathar revival isn't about creating new dogmas. It's about awakening, recognizing that each person carries the same light the Cathars honored, understanding that living in harmony with this inner radiance is the only genuine act of rebellion in a world constructed on illusion. Maris didn't ask for blind belief. He invited direct investigation. Look within. Test the world you inhabit against the quiet flame inside your heart. Ask whether the life you're told to live is authentically yours, or whether it belongs to the false king wearing different masks. In that question lives Catharism's enduring power. Once a soul dares to ask it sincerely, embers begin glowing again. The light that Crusaders tried to extinguish in 1244 never actually died, it waited, like seeds in frozen ground, for the right conditions to germinate. And across Europe, then across the world, something began stirring. People who'd never heard of medieval France found themselves drawn to questions the Cathars had asked. Seekers discovered fragments of Cathar wisdom and recognized something they'd always known but couldn't articulate. The prophecy whispered at Montségur that after Chibai years, the light would return began manifesting not as a historical event but as a personal awakening multiplied across countless individual hearts. The prophecy awakens among the ruins of Montségur. Where wind whispers through ancient stones, a prophecy has echoed across centuries. Before the final flames consume them, the Cathars supposedly declared, after 700 years, the laurel will turn green again and the light of Montségur will shine. Were these merely the desperate words of a doomed people, poetic farewell before annihilation? Or did they glimpse something deeper, a promise encoded in time itself? The phrase, the light of Montségur, has captivated mystics and seekers for generations. Was it literal a sacred fire that once burned upon that mountain fortress? Or symbolic wisdom itself buried beneath centuries of ash, waiting for those courageous enough to uncover it? The prophecy pointed to a cycle of 700 years. And remarkably, around the 1940s, humanity entered a season of profound transformation. Women's voices began rising from centuries of suppression. Hidden knowledge resurfaced from unexpected places. A collective thirst for deeper spiritual truths spread across cultures like wildflowers after rain. Many believe this prophecy concerned not political power or empire rebuilding, but something far more significant, the rebirth of the sacred feminine. In medieval Europe, women's voices were systematically silenced, their intuition dismissed as weakness, their authority stripped away by patriarchal institutions. But the Cathars, with their profound reverence for Sophia divine wisdom personified as feminine, seemed to see further into time's currents. They hinted at an era when this imbalance would shift, when what had been suppressed would flow again like a hidden river finally breaking through stone. Perhaps the prophecy was not about a fixed calendar date, but about the eternal rhythm of forgetting and remembering, exile and return. And if we dare to look with clear eyes, we can see signs of this renewal manifesting everywhere around us. Consider the transformation in how Mary Magdalene is understood. For centuries, the Church portrayed her as a reformed sinner, a convenient reduction that stripped her of spiritual authority. But deeper traditions, particularly those cherished in southern France where Cathar influence lingered, whispered of something entirely different. They spoke of Magdalene as a bearer of hidden wisdom, a keeper of Gnosis, perhaps even the authentic spiritual successor of Christ himself. The Cathars revered her profoundly, seeing in Magdalene the embodiment of Sophia, the sacred feminine silenced by institutional power. Legends throughout Languedoc and Provence tell of her presence after the crucifixion, arriving on Mediterranean shores carrying the flame of hidden teachings. Chapels, caves, and holy wells dedicated to her still mark the landscape silent witnesses to a story written not in official scriptures, but in the memory of Earth itself. In this narrative, Magdalene isn't a figure of shame but of initiation. She holds the chalice not merely as historical relic but as symbol of the womb vessel of life, heart of divine wisdom. Artists, mystics, and poets have long intuited this truth. She wasn't simply following Christ but walking beside him, carrying half of a wisdom the world wasn't ready to receive. Her story mirrors the Cathar prophecy perfectly. Both speak of suppressed wisdom waiting for its moment to return. Magdalene's silence was never emptiness, it was a seed, much like the laurel at Montségur, waiting for conditions that would allow it to flourish again. Her presence in southern France weaves seamlessly into Cathar tradition, as if she were the hidden root nourishing their vision across centuries. And when we allow this possibility to settle into our awareness, something powerful shifts. Magdalene transforms from myth into mirror, reflecting back our potential to carry hidden truths, to embody wisdom that institutions may fear, but the soul cannot forget. In her, we see the invitation to reclaim what was lost: intuition united with strength, tenderness merged with courage, the divine feminine no longer separate from but integrated with the divine masculine. But her legacy points towards something larger still, a collective awakening, a rebalancing our world desperately needs. It's the call of the sacred feminine returning, not only in ancient stories, but in present choices, current ways of being. Across cultures and centuries, symbols of the sacred feminine have quietly endured. The rose, blooming with beauty and thorns, speaks of love holding both ecstasy and necessary pain. The chalice, vessel of transformation, mirrors the womb as a source of creation. Water, endlessly flowing, reflects intuition, healing, and renewal. And Sophia, eternal wisdom, has always existed, sometimes hidden, sometimes forgotten, but never destroyed. Today, these symbols resurface with renewed power. People worldwide are awakening to the necessity of balance between masculine and feminine energies, not as opposing forces but as complementary principles. Logic and intuition, structure and flow, action and receptivity, assertion and compassion. This isn't abstract philosophy anymore. It's visible in movements for equality, in the rise of holistic healing modalities, in calls for environmental sustainability, in demands for leadership that values empathy alongside strength. Think about it carefully. When someone chooses deep listening over reactive arguing, they embody the feminine principle. When communities prioritize collaboration over ruthless competition, they enact the prophecy of balance. Even in business, organizations that nurture creativity, cultivate empathy, and honor intuition are thriving in ways rigid hierarchies cannot match. The sacred feminine is no longer theoretical, it's alive in choices shaping our daily reality. Yet this awakening is profoundly personal as well. It asks each of us, where have I silenced my intuition? Where have I allowed rigid structure to dominate natural flow? Honoring the sacred feminine isn't about rejecting masculine energy, but about weaving them together. It's about becoming whole. A man who embraces tenderness loses no strength. A woman who embodies wisdom possesses immense power. From this perspective, the Cathar prophecy takes on startling clarity. The light of Montségur was never about armies or empires, it concerned this very moment, the healing of humanity's relationship with the feminine. As civilization faces climate crisis, division, and profound disconnection, feminine energy points us back toward harmony, toward listening to what the earth is saying, toward valuing being as much as doing. The rose blooms again, water flows freely, the chalice is lifted, and the prophecy steps out of history into our present moment. But here's the deeper mystery. The true question isn't whether the sacred feminine is returning. It's whether we're ready to recognize ourselves as part of that return. Which brings us to the most important reflection of all. Your awakening, your choice, every ancient prophecy eventually becomes a mirror. The Cathar vision isn't solely about distant futures or past martyrs, it's about the present moment, about you listening right now. The sacred feminine doesn't return as external event. It awakens within each heart, brave enough to feel, to question, to remember. Perhaps the real question isn't when the prophecy will be fulfilled, but who will embody it. What if the light of Montségur isn't a flame on a distant mountain, but the quiet fire within your consciousness? Think of the moments when you've chosen compassion over judgment, intuition over fear, truth over convenient comfort. Those weren't small gestures. They were sparks of prophecy, fragments of a larger awakening, threads weaving the feminine back into reality's fabric. This reflection invites us beyond passive observation into active participation. Admiring ancient mysteries isn't enough. They're invitations. The Cathars, Mary Magdalene, Sophia, ancient goddess traditions, all these archetypes call us to remember who we are. They whisper that the same wisdom we revere in them lives within us, waiting for expression through our choices, relationships, and visions for the future. Imagine if the prophecy isn't about endings but beginnings, not about ruins and ashes, but renewal and rebirth. What would it mean if humanity's greatest hidden treasure wasn't buried in a fortress but concealed within the human heart? If you carry the light they foresaw, then history isn't behind you. It's unfolding through you. This realization can feel unsettling because it shifts responsibility directly to us. It's easier believing change comes from outside some revelation or dramatic event. But what if the Cathars meant something more radical? What if they were pointing across time to the moment you decide to embody truth, to live as though Sophia herself guides your steps? So how do we translate ancient Cathar wisdom into practical modern life? We live in an era of smartphones and skyscrapers, algorithmic feeds, and existential overwhelm. The Cathars inhabited stone villages, lit candles for contemplation, and renounced worldly enticements to awaken the soul. Yet the essence of their path, the art of spiritual remembering, is more relevant than ever. The Cathars understood that awakening begins with discernment. In today's world, that means learning to perceive what feeds your inner light and what feeds illusion. First, begin with silence. The Cathars practiced contemplation not through elaborate rituals, but through presence. Start with a simple daily practice, 10 minutes in stillness. No phone, no agenda, just you and your breath. Listen to the silence beneath thought. Over time, this develops the inner ear, the capacity to hear what the conditioned mind forgets. Second, refine your consumption. Cathars embraced vegetarianism not from moral superiority, but because they recognized how consumption binds consciousness. You don't need to become ascetic overnight, but begin noticing. What are you feeding yourself physically, mentally, emotionally? Try this experiment for 3 days. Eliminate anything inducing craving or mental dullness. Processed foods, sensational media, gossip, harsh judgment. Watch what arises in the absence. That discomfort, that space, that's where remembrance begins. Third, practice ethical non-attachment. The Cathars rejected violence, excess, and hierarchy not from rebellion, but because those systems obscure spiritual clarity. In your life, ask, where am I clinging to identity, approval, status? Choose one small attachment and loosen your grip. Not to punish yourself, but to create space for light to emerge naturally. Fourth, rediscover the consolamentum within. While the literal rite may be lost to time, its essence persists, the inner turning, the soul's reconnection with Source. Create a personal, sacred initiation. It could be a quiet walk in nature where you declare your intention to remember, or a vow whispered before sleep. I choose light over illusion. I choose remembering over forgetting. Do this with reverence. You're reigniting an ancient fire. Fifth, live as a vessel of light. The perfecti weren't saints on pedestals. They were reminders, living mirrors. You don't need special robes or formal vows to carry light in daily moments. How you speak, how you respond to frustration, how you forgive in these choices, you become either window or wall. Ask yourself frequently, am I reflecting light or absorbing shadow? Sixth, watch for archons in modern disguise. The Cathars warned of unseen forces mimicking truth. Today, these appear as ideologies, movements, even spiritual teachers. How do you discern authenticity? Ask, does this path encourage fear or love? Control or liberation? Ego inflation or soul development? Genuine light never demands your allegiance. It invites your awakening. Seventh, create fellowship of remembrance. The Cathars lived in community not from necessity but resonance. Find or build a circle of kindred souls. You don't need a monastery. Even two people meeting in truth create sacred space. Speak of soul matters. Share dreams. Guard one another's light. These steps aren't rigid rules. They're reminders. You're not here to achieve perfection. You're here to remember that you were never broken. Cathar teachings, though scorched by time, still whisper, you are light dreaming of matter. You are freedom pretending to be bound. Each time you choose truth over comfort, stillness over noise, Love over illusion, you walk the Cathar path not in their robes, but in your radiance. Centuries have passed since fires burned at Montségur, where over 200 souls walked willingly into flames. To the world, they died as heretics. But to those who remember, they ascended as keepers of deeper truth, one that no sword, no decree, no inquisition could extinguish. Because the truth they carried was never theirs alone. It was, and remains, yours to remember. The Cathars taught that this world is shadow play, a dream mistaken for reality, and that authentic salvation comes not from external authority, but from awakening the divine flame already within you. They lived in defiance of fear, in devotion to light, in service to the soul's eternal journey home. Today, their whispers return not as doctrine but as call, not to escape the world but to see through it, not to follow blindly but to know deeply, not to be saved but to remember that you were never truly lost. In their fall, the Cathars planted seeds of Gnosis, of quiet resistance, of luminous clarity. Those seeds are sprouting again in those who meditate instead of medicate, who question instead of conform, who seek the inner temple rather than the outer throne. If you've felt that the world isn't what it seems, if you've sensed that your soul belongs to a light not found in books or buildings, if you've heard the faint echo of a truth too dangerous to speak aloud, then perhaps you were always meant to find this path. And now it's time to walk it. Let their legacy live not in memory alone, but in your presence, your choices, your awakening. Become what they died to protect, a soul unbound, a vessel of light, a living reminder that even in darkest times, truth cannot be burned. The final question lingers, whispered from Montségur's stones. What if the prophecy was never waiting for the world to change, but waiting for you to awaken? The answer cannot be spoken in words, it must be lived. If this journey has awakened something within you, don't let this moment fade. The Cathars understood that transformation happens not in isolation but in community, not in silence but in shared remembrance. Subscribe to our channel, The Lost Gospels of Jesus, so you never miss these explorations into forgotten wisdom that refuses to stay buried. Each video is another key, another doorway into truths the world tried to erase. Hit that like button to help this message reach other seekers who are ready to hear it. The algorithm may control visibility, but your engagement creates ripples that carry light further than any of us can alone. Drop a comment below sharing what resonated most deeply with you. Was it the Cathar courage in facing the flames? The prophecy of the sacred feminine returning? The practical steps for awakening? Your words matter. Your voice might be exactly what awakens another soul's remembrance. Hit the bell notification so you're alerted the moment new content goes live. This isn't about staying informed, it's about staying connected to a community of awakening consciousness. Share this video with friends who are asking the same questions you've been asking, who are feeling the same restlessness, the same sense that something profound is missing from the stories we've been told. The Cathars knew that light multiplies when it's shared. The fire of Montségur still burns, and tonight it burns in you. Reflect, reclaim your silence. Seek the light within. And remember, you don't need permission to awaken. Only the courage to remember who you are. Walk gently, seek deeply, and shine without fear. The prophecy isn't waiting for heroes. It's waiting for you.